Hey there, hi. Bet you thought I forgot about you, didn't you? No, Sir Barbarino, I did not. Here we are, ready for chapter 2. Count them two. 1, 2 fingers of He Loves Me from Wayne Jacobson. Now, we left off last time with a couple of questions. I'm just going to throw those back out. How often do you find yourself doubting God's love for you? And when do you question His love the most? Now, I don't know if you answered those or not, but I'll tell you mine. Mine actually have very little to do with God and not a whole lot to do with the whole material circumstance and so much to do with other people. When people are mean-spirited or manipulative or they betray me or betray a trust and things, those are the times I find myself railing up against God and saying, how could you? Even though it's not Him, obviously, it's them. But those are the times that I have the biggest issue. And like I say, I understand it's not Him, it's people being people, but nonetheless, that's where I go with it. So those are the times I have the biggest questions with regards to how He is and how He feels about me. Which is kind of funny because with that answer in mind, I go to chapter 2, and it's all about relationship. It's almost like He knew, right? Like He just wrote that just for me, understand? Yeah, I know. It starts off here at the top with a little quote from Philip Yancey, and it says, God is not mute. The word spoke not out of a whirlwind, but out of the human larynx of a Palestinian Jew. Palestinian Jew there, just, yeah. I understand here, yes. But yeah, so we begin chapter 2 with that, which is entitled, What Jesus' Disciples Didn't Know. And the general gist of the chapter comes out is what it was like being one of Jesus' disciples, but also being Jesus. And one, we have this ragtag group that's sort of been thrown together. And they are a pretty ragtag group, aren't they? I mean, if you look at who they were, you know, for the most part, they were blue-collar workers. A good chunk of them fishermen, like if you're... now, I'm recording this from Nova Scotia, and there's different places where there are boats that go out to fish, you know, for lobster and things of that nature. These guys, those are the guys that Jesus picked, you know. So if you're a lobster fisherman or something of that nature, you're in good company, just saying. But, I mean, there's other groups. There's, there's Matthew, who's the tax collector, and we understand, like, tax man is one thing, but in their day and age, it was somebody who had betrayed their own people and gone to work for the Romans, who didn't only just take what the Romans were taking, but took a little extra on the side to make themselves a little more money. So, like, they were not... There's a reason why, when you read the Gospels, that it mentions tax collectors and sinners as two separate things. They were like a whole different level of depravity as far as they were concerned. Then you have Simon, who was a zealot, and little background there, he would either be considered a freedom fighter if you were a Jew, or a terrorist if you were a Roman. And you can picture him getting together with Matthew and then the rest of them. It would have been an interesting grouping. But the author had made the mention of the fact that somewhere along the line they hit this point where everything just went click. And when I say click, I mean somebody said something, somebody opened up and was just real. You know what I mean? In that moment they were real and they were raw and they were open, and everything changed. Instantly, nobody was on guard. Instantly, people were free to be themselves. And you see that happen in any group. And in so much as that is a wonderful thing to see happen, open and honest relationship, the author's point is what it is to be, you know, Jesus in this midst, God incarnate. Now, they don't realize at this time that it's God incarnate, that God has stepped down and has lived among them and is with them. But this is what God enjoyed in the garden before everything just went to blah, right? You know, before everything fell apart. And how amazing it would have been for him to sit there with a group of people, his children, his creation, who were enjoying life and enjoying each other and enjoying him and just being open and honest and just being sitting around the fire, right? I mean, because that's what they were doing, right? They were sitting around the fire, poking in, whatever, joking around, and just being themselves with him. Because that's what he desired right from the get-go. If we look back, way back into Genesis, that's where we are, is God would walk in the garden, right? He would hang out with man. He would hang out with humanity. And then things fell apart. And when things fell apart, the first thing mankind did is hid from God and separated themselves off and pulled back away. How heartbreaking that would have been for him. And how amazing it would have been for him with the disciples when they were comfortable with each other and with him, to the point that they went, wow, and they were just themselves. But a big part of that is, of course, they didn't realize who they were talking to. They didn't realize who he was. And that's a big part of it, right? And it's hard sometimes, well, let's be honest, it's hard most of the time to picture that that's what God wants from us. That he wants that intimate, close, personal relationship. That he wants to just be one of the guys. Think of your bestie. Think of the person at work that you hang out with the most and things. This is what he wants. He wants to be that close to you. And he wants you to be comfortable being that close to him. But we tend not to be. And the biggest reason we tend not to be is because, we're so self-concerned about ourselves, And to give a great example here, the author mentions that he would like to go to speaking engagements, conferences and things, and he'd like to get there like early, half an hour, 2 hours early, so he could meet people. He'd talk to them as they come in, and there'd be members of the staff of whatever church that was sponsoring them, and there'd be just parishioners. They come in, they chat, and they chat about their kids and their day and their work and whatever was going on. Until they found out who he was. And then instantly everything changed. It was all about what he wrote or what he says or what this. And they don't want to bother him with trivial matters. But he's really into the trivial. He wants to know about who they are and who their lives are. And he's really interested in that. So it's an interesting parallel that, God wants to be able to relate to us and us relate to him as if we didn't know who he was. But he still wants us to know who he was, even in the midst of that. It's an interesting thought, to be sure. And it's one, like I say, I think we have a lot of, I don't think a lot of us really hit that point of relating to God on that kind of a level, even though that's what he desires. I mean, that was the purpose of the cross, right? Was to get rid of all the in-between to reunite us with God in the first place so that we could have that. But not so much for our sake, so much as for his, because that's what he wants, right? And I would safely say God probably deserves to get what it is that he wants. Anyways, sort of an interesting little walkthrough there on that chapter. Way too much to sit here and do chapter and verse sitting here reading on this one. Just saying, it's just, you know what I mean? But we do have, again, a couple of questions at the end. I know you're excited. You were waiting. Oh, what are the questions? I know, eh? Okay, so, verbatim here. Spend a few moments thinking about your relationship with God. Do you see it growing in closeness and sensitivity, or does it feel abstract? Is he more real than your closest friend, or a distant presence that rarely seems to engage in real issues of your life? Hmm. If your relationship with him isn't what you want it to be, ask him to help you grow, to know him better, and to recognize his presence throughout each day. Probably a good idea. Just saying. But it certainly does bring up a lot, doesn't it, right? You know? I mean, we tend to, with regards to our faith, whether you are a Christian or not a Christian, you tend to distance these things as spiritual abstracts, as something in your brain that you are understanding in some capacity, as opposed to something that you understand, here, as a heart thing. Anyways, that would be chapter 2 in a nutshell. Don't worry, I won't forget you. We will be back for chapter 3 again, as I said before. Lots of book left. Ooh. I know you're just waiting with bated breath, like I understand. I feel the same way. I really do. Anyways, I hope you're well. I hope you take care. Again, the book is He Loves Me from Wayne Jacobson. If any of this is interesting, Amazon is your friend. Yes, I am. Kindle works, but I can't read Kindle works. I've got a bunch of Kindle books, and I just, I'm not comfortable, so hard copy is better for me. But anyways, we are all in this together. All right? One joy, shape, form, or passion or another. Hope you take care. God bless. Until next time. Ciao.